My name is Tom Blount. I'm the director of Lincoln Science and Innovation Park Limited, which is a joint venture company owned by the University of Lincoln and Lincolnshire Co-op. We are a single site developer tasked with regenerating a brownfield site on the edge of Lincoln city centre. Our objectives are to create a cluster of innovation excellence in the city centre that's been very negatively impacted by deindustrialization over the course of the last few decades, and one that's at the heart of a largely rural county with a large population, but one that's spread across a very large area. The challenge that Lincoln faces, and Lincolnshire indeed faces, is very similar to that faced by many parts of the Midlands and northern England, and that is deindustrialization that's led to large numbers of companies going under and large numbers of jobs ceasing to exist. This photograph's from our site, from the Science Park site, and was taken in the late 50s, early 1960s, when Ruston Bucyrus had all of their factories, research and development facilities and the like here on site. In fact, the building you can see in the mid-ground was purpose-built for one of the first computers in the country. Such was the level of innovation going on here back in the 1950s. Unfortunately, Ruston Bucyrus, in common with many other exporters, and Ruston was one of the largest exporters of construction plant in the country, saw its situation significantly deteriorate over the course of the 70s and the 80s, to the extent now that most of the site is brownfield. 3,000 people who did work here no longer work here, and many of the 3,000 other jobs around Lincoln that relied upon Ruston Bucyrus have also disappeared. This is a really good case study of deindustrialization for us, because Ruston Bucyrus was a company for decades that relied upon innovation. It was one of the first companies to develop plant with caterpillar tracks and the like. However, when it fell into a joint venture with an American corporation, it found that a lot of that research and development moved over to the States. So consequently, when the market moved on, when pneumatics became the major driver of innovation in the construction market, Ruston Bucyrus was left behind and the business withered on the vine, as it were. To the extent that now, in the 21st century, of the 20 or so construction sheds that Ruston Bucyrus had on site, each of about 15,000 square feet, all but two have now either been demolished or are standing empty. And that impact of deindustrialization upon Lincoln's economy is very clear when we look at the economic data. We're the second worst LEP in England for business investment and research and development. We have the second poorest LEP statistics for employment in the knowledge economy, and that has consequential knock-on into employment, NVQ4 plus level, into value-added factors into the local economy. Lincoln tends not to suffer the same depressions that the rest of the country do when the market crashes, but equally it doesn't enjoy those highs. And what we're trying to do is bring some of that dynamism back into the Lincoln economy. And there are opportunities here. Here on this slide, you can see a Boeing E-3D Sentry aircraft based at RAF Waddington, about 10 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now. That's from Number 8 Squadron, which is part of the RAF ISTAR Hub. That's the Intelligence, Surveillance, Target Acquisition and Reconnaissance group, which is based just up the hill from me and seeps over into nearby RAF Digby, where Joint Signals is also located. These are big consumers of new and experimental technology, and consequently, we've seen a big uptick in defence technology vendors locating themselves and basing themselves here in Lincolnshire. On the other side of the equation, we're seeing a large number of very technically proficient forces personnel being demobbed into our local economy, and we think there's an opportunity to make use of their skills. Furthermore, Lincolnshire is also a genuine hub in agri-tech and food technology, including robotics, which is unsurprising when you consider that Lincolnshire has more Grade 1 agricultural land than any other LEP area in England, and produces about 12% of England's food and processes about 70% of England's fish. Strangely, there's quite a lot of commonality between defence and agri-tech, and the glue that binds them together is technology innovation, particularly digital innovation. And we're lucky to have an increasingly strong source of highly skilled practitioners in this area, in part thanks to the university, which, although only established in its current form in 2001, was ranked this year as number 17 in the Guardian rankings. So this brownfield site that we are developing has been in decline largely since the early 1980s, to the extent that when I arrived in 2013, the most profitable business on the site was a scrapyard. However, there were early attempts to regenerate the site. One of the first was the joint project between Lincolnshire County Council and the City of Lincoln Council in developing an innovation centre managed by the university here on the site. It was a highly speculative development back in 2009, particularly when you consider what was going on in the economy in 2009. However, it did enough to prove that there was sufficient high innovation in businesses in Lincolnshire to justify a more strategic, wider investment. And that's where I and the owners of the company that I run came in. In 2013, the University of Lincoln and Lincolnshire Co-op got together and looked at think tank, which you can see at the top of this diagram, and saw that the opportunities it was creating gave us the impetus to create a much wider, larger investment in the site. And this was phase one of Lincoln Science and Innovation Park, which we opened in 2014. The intention was a campus adjacent to the university campus, co-locating academia, students, and enterprise, with a circa 50-50 split between academia and industry across about 12,000 square metres of development. And that's what we've been busy doing for the last 5 years or so. Our first development, opened in 2014, was the Joseph Banks Laboratories. This was originally Ruston Bucyrus's headquarters, which we have turned from a fairly drab and depressed 1940s office into a state-of-the-art laboratories, which has allowed the university to consolidate its College of Science into a new home. Not only did it provide a single location for life sciences to operate, but it allowed the establishment of 2 new schools, chemistry and pharmacy. The latter is particularly interesting because that's what brought the co-op into the mix. The co-op, who originally owned much of this site, operate a large number of chemist stores and were struggling to recruit. So as part of the deal with the university, they convinced the university to establish a school of pharmacy to provide them with raw recruits to go into their chemist stores. There being a lot of evidence to suggest that pharmacists tend to practice very close to where they actually trained. And that's created a really unusual shareholder mix for the science park, where the co-op are providing us with strategic advice and capital to develop, and the university are providing us with that core of academic research and a good throughput of students to create businesses, to fill roles in expanding businesses. And it's been a very successful model for us to date, as I hope you'll see a little bit later. Of course, one of the challenges we had was that we were a science park, which was predominantly operated by the university. We didn't have a large amount of industrially focused space. So in 2017, with some support from the Greater Lincolnshire Lab, we opened the Blount Technology Centre. This was designed to provide the first technology-specific space available ever in Lincolnshire. Historically, if you needed a laboratory in Lincolnshire, you either hoped that the university was able to lend you some space, you at great expense built it yourself, or you left. And the evidence we have suggests that the vast majority of firms who required that highly bespoke, highly flexible, highly serviced technology space left. And that was a brain drain upon our economy. I'm very pleased to say that we've been very successful in keeping some of those businesses here locally. We've gone from opening in May 2017 to full occupancy this year. In doing so, the tenants of that 3,000 square metre building have recorded 94.5 FTE new jobs created. Most of those are in that key NVQ4 plus level. Many of them are graduates of the University of Lincoln. And those companies have also raised more than £10 million of external investment. And the vast majority of that has come from outside of our county. So we see ourselves as being at the forefront of creating this new technology cluster here in Lincoln. I just wanted to talk about a couple of the businesses that we've started here, which have done very, very well from our perspective. The first is Tended. Tended started in late 2017 with 2.5 members of staff. I clearly remember having a conversation with my board about taking this very raw startup and explaining that they may not always be able to pay their rent, but there was potential here. And I think that potential has been realised, because over the course of the last 2 years or so, Tended have raised more than £2 million of investment. The key to that was they originally developed a safety device that was targeted at B2C consumers. It was intended to provide a degree of safety for people undertaking risky solo sporting activities. They pivoted, with our help and others' help, in 2018 to look at B2B, to look at lone workers, to look at high-risk workers. And that's allowed them to raise a great deal of investment money from business angels, from venture capitalists, and it's allowed them to expand from my smallest unit here in the Blount Technology Centre to currently occupying 210 square metres, with 29 people working there, and being listed as one of the TechNation Rising Stars this year. We're very proud of where they've come from. Secondly, I just wanted to talk about Arden Biotechnology. The wonderful thing about Arden is that they are a very high-end technology provider, to the extent that they won a Longitude Prize a couple of years ago. That they are developing alternatives to antibiotic control of disease in poultry, largely focused on bacteriophage and similar platform technologies. The origin of Arden was a PhD project backed by a KTP, and the sponsor of the KTP was so impressed with the PhD candidate that they decided to invest in the business, to the extent that they fitted out a large laboratory, taken an office from us, and they're now looking at doubling their space, because they've grown since 2017 from 1 full-time researcher now today to, I believe, 16 full-time researchers. They led a successful bid for £1.5 million of joint UK-China research funding. And just earlier this year, they've won a major grant from McDonald's to have a look at food security in their poultry supply chain, which is again, a big win for us. So as you can see, the Blount Technology Centre is making best use of the kind of research facilities we have here on Lincoln Science Innovation Park, but also spinning out and growing businesses, creating the kind of jobs and the kind of investment opportunities that historically simply haven't been as readily available in Lincoln, or at least as visible in Lincoln as we would have liked. One of our big challenges at the moment, though, is that we are full. We have expanded businesses like Tended, like Arden and others, from single offices to multi-offices, to the extent that we are now 100% full, and we're no longer able to contain the growth of these businesses. We are very concerned that if they continue to expand at their current rate, there is nowhere in Lincolnshire that can accommodate that, and we may lose them elsewhere, and the economic impact of them. Therefore, earlier this year, we acquired another 6.5 acres of land next door for our phase 2, and also about 18 months ago bought a 2,500 square metre Grade A office building occupied by a sitting tenant next to that. That's allowing us to begin, hopefully over the course of the next 18 months, work on phase 2. And we're in negotiation for about a 10 million investment into that phase 2 to make it plot ready for incoming investment. Our plan for phase 2 is to develop about 12,000 square metres of new space, doubling our current provision. We estimate that's going to cost between 35 and 40 million pounds over the course of the next decade. And we think that will be about 25% academic led space, 25% grow on space and multi occupancy, and 50% single occupancy. The first development we're looking at, funded by the European Regional Development Fund, and we're hoping to be on site with later this year, is grow on space, about 10,000 square foot to deal with our immediate expansion pressures. And as I said, we're hoping to be beginning that in December. Clearly, it's challenging times to be expanding in the commercial property sector. Access to funding isn't an issue, but commercial risk is a major issue. Valuations and balance sheet stability are a big issue, and accepting grants with all the terms and conditions associated is equally a challenge. But we're very hopeful that this represents a great opportunity for us to expand into the 21st century and to give Lincoln the best opportunity to be a modern, future-focused economy for the next decades to come.